All right, jolly morning to all. So yeah, I thought before we sit, I just wanted to share an experience I had in my sitting this morning, which I've had many times, but it's more of a typical retreat experience. But I think it's a really important one for people to understand. I I woke up a little early, and so when I was meditating, I started to fall asleep, and I had determined I was going to sit for 45 minutes. And after about 15 minutes, I started getting really groggy. And, I was open my eyes a little bit, strengthen my posture, take some breaths. And it just was like really foggy and it was really unpleasant. Um, and I kept sitting. And this like happens a lot on retreats. And I know many of you have been on retreats and have had this experience. But what's really striking to me is that I just kept going and going and, kept kind of keeping, I wasn't even nodding out much. I was just in that kind of the brain fog. And at a certain point, and I keep a clock in front of me when I'm sitting, and I look at the clock from time to time. So there you go. Don't tell anybody. Um, and at a certain point, energy came back. And I opened my eyes, and it was about between 35 and 40 minutes in. And at that point, I realized, now I could just keep sitting. I could just keep going, and it's very striking to me because there is this, it's such an unpleasant feeling that you want to stop meditating. And I was tempted to say, well, 30 minutes is enough this morning. I'll just go up and get a cup of tea, and, but I think it's such a great lesson to realize that you can sit through it, that you can sit through those and that it will change. Turns out impermanence also works with fatigue in meditation. And you know, I theorize about this, but it's just, thoughts, just idea that if we um, if we keep sitting, if we keep being mindful, I'm sorry, my phone was buzzing. Turn the sound off entirely. If we keep sitting and being mindful, that the mindfulness has this energetically balancing quality to it, that if we're agitated, if we're anxious and we sit, after a while, we'll calm down. And conversely, if we are really dull and sleepy, if we sit long enough and stick with it, that our energy will rise. But I think it's a really important thing to understand and practice so that we don't bail out when it seems difficult. And frankly, it's a really interesting and weird thing to sit through. It's like to feel your body and to feel your brain and be in those states. And so it's, just from a mindfulness standpoint, it's an interesting state to work with, to just sit through. So I just wanted to share that because it, seems worth sharing. And it just happened. So it's fresh on my mind. So hopefully many of you are really sleepy right now and you can do this practice. Although 20 minutes is just enough usually to put you to sleep. I will say that in order to get through those energetic dips, it usually does take a longer sit. It usually takes 45 minutes. It doesn't seem to really happen. Like usually the slump happens in 15 to 20 minute period, and then you got to keep going. So but this class we just sit for 20 minutes. So hopefully, sincerely, I hope you are not tired, that you can enjoy your sit. Okay, so settling into your meditation posture. The essence of our posture is this alignment and balance that we work toward, to have the body erect and the spine, the head, the hips all in alignment. So the weight of the body is held by the skeleton rather than the bone, the muscles of the body. So we're not putting stress on the muscles. And from that posture of alignment, we can then begin to soften and relax the body. Releasing the shoulders, softening the belly, relaxing the jaw, the face. Feeling the body as a single object, just feeling the whole body. The stillness. And even in that perception of the oneness of the body, seeing the many different sensations within that single body. It's striking that what we call stillness is not still at all. We can feel so much going on. Besides the obvious movement of the breath, the different energies in the body. We know that the blood is pulsing, the nervous system is sending constant messages, that the digestive system is working, that all these parts of the body are busy and quite active. And this becomes more apparent when we hold the body still in our meditation posture. This then actually provides us with a kind of parallel to the movement of mind in contrast to the observing quality of mind. There's a stillness in that observing or mindfulness element, just as there's a stillness in the body. But we see that no matter how still that observing is, there is movement in the mind. So in order to help us to be more present, to connect more with that stillness of mind, the stillness of observing, we bring mindfulness to the breath itself. The breath is moving in the body as it must for us to live. And there are always sensations, however subtle, tied to that movement. You can feel the breath at the nostrils, just the air touching in and out. It's a good concentration object. And we can also feel the breath moving in the belly, the rising and falling. Another very useful concentration object. When we turn our attention to the breath, this constant activity of the body, there's a natural calming that happens. We are brought into the present moment. The breath can only be felt in the present moment. We experience this rhythm, a rhythm that moves at its own pace. There is nowhere to go, nothing more to do than to breathe in and breathe out as the body wishes. We are just the observers of this activity. And although we can try to control it by holding the breath or taking deeper breaths, by and large, it's an activity outside of our will. If we hold our breath long enough, we'll simply go unconscious and the body will start breathing again. And like so much of what goes on in our bodies, there's an incredibly complex system that's operating, taking in oxygen, oxygen going into the bloodstream, exhaling the parts of the breath that the body can't use, cleansing. Again, without our will involved. When we simply look at these activities of body and mind and nervous system, we see that our idea of a self who is running or controlling our life is a complete illusion. We're not responsible for our life coming to be, for our conception, for our birth. And to a great extent, we're not responsible for sustaining life. Of course, we can interrupt life, we can end life, but in terms of ordinary living, we breathe, we eat, we drink. But our body does the work. We have the same illusion about thoughts. That these are my thoughts, that I am thinking or in control of my thinking purposefully. When we bring mindfulness just to what's arising in the mind, we see that much of what arises really doesn't appeal to us. We would not actually choose to think many of the thoughts that arise in the mind. As a system, the complexity of the mind is beyond our grasp, certainly beyond our control. We meditate to get perhaps some small power over the mind, or to take care of the brain, take care of the mind. We could say that we meditate in order to make friends with our mind. so that we can be in harmony with this system that we do not control. Well, um, nice to see everyone, and many of you have been hanging out with me this last year and a half. So hopefully you don't mind me kind of improvising a little bit on the guided meditation, have a little fun, if you can call that fun. Not unfun, but just maybe not, not entertaining. But anyway, I just wanted to say, so I'm going to once again draw from my book, Living Kindness. And again, for people who are new, we've been going through my book one breath at a time since the beginning of the pandemic, or the beginning of the shutdown. And we're in step 11, and we got to the section called metta, which is a word for loving kindness. And so I've taken a side trip into my book, Living Kindness, which of course is a reflection on those teachings. But this is a book that I self-published in 2018. And this weekend, I signed a contract with Shambhala for them to publish it. They're not going to, and so I'm going to have to stop selling it. I have 30 days. So if you're interested in having this version before a new version comes out, you should buy it in the next 30 days. And the new version is probably not going to be, it's not going to be significantly different. I don't know what we maybe we'll add a little something here and there, and it'll have like a new cover, and probably fewer typos. But it's one of, publishers are really slow. It takes them a year, even though the book is already written, it takes them a year to put it out. So I just wanted you to know that, in case you're interested in having the book. And I'm gonna purchase about 50 copies, I think, to have on hand. So if people over the year, like, oh, I didn't get it, I want a copy, then I can mail people copies of it. Normally I would have them at my live teachings, but there are very few live teachings. So there you go. So with all that, I wanted to go to the section, it's chapter 5, it's called Born from Those Who Are Dear. And much of this book is kind of built around and inspired by suttas from the Pali Canon. So if you're not familiar with what that means, suttas are probably the more common word that we hear in the West is sutra, but in any case, it just means like teaching or discourse. And the Pali Canon is this collection of discourses of suttas. It has other things besides suttas, but the main thing that we kind of look to it for is the suttas, which are the oldest living, it's not living, but the oldest teachings of Buddhism that come out of the Theravadan Buddhist tradition, which is the oldest surviving sort of tradition. There were a bunch of different schools of Buddhism that arose in the years after the Buddha's death, and the Theravadan is the one that survived. And it's said that it was the most conservative one, which says something about conservatism, at least in the Buddhist world. So we study these suttas to try to get close to what the Buddha taught. We can't know exactly, but because there's so many of these suttas, we can kind of assume that when we see consistent ideas being repeated over and over, then that those were things that the Buddha really did teach. Whereas there are things that show up just occasionally, which seem sort of off, and you kind of go, Really? The Buddha said that too? It's, um, so this sutta uh, is number 87 in the Majjhima Nikaya. So the Majjhima Nikaya is one of the collections of suttas. It means middle length discourses. So they're not long and they're not short. They're middle length. So I'll read a little bit from Living Kindness. Even as the Buddha extols the importance of loving everyone, ourselves, our dear ones, even our enemies, he warns against the risk of another kind of love, that founded in need, attachment, and clinging. Ironically, though the Metta Sutta uses mother love as the ideal image of loving kindness, it's parental attachment that he uses to explain this danger. I stumbled on this idea in my early, somewhat random explorations of the suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya. With my daughter still a toddler, I wondered if the Buddha had any teachings about the joy, or at least the experience, of parenthood. Paging through the table of contents, I found a sutta entitled, Born from Those Who Are Dear, Majjhima Nikaya 87, and thought, perfect, this will be something about the beauty of the parent-child relationship. Wrong. In parentheses, is it only a coincidence that this sutta follows on Angulimala, the story of a serial killer? Close parentheses. You can see I like to have fun when I'm writing. In the Buddha's typical unsentimental way, the sutta points out all the suffering that happens when we are emotionally attached to others. This was not the message I wanted to read, as I was in the throes of deep attachment to my daughter. But reading the sutta, I had to admit that the Buddha was right, as usual. The sutta begins by telling us about a man whose only son has died. He is unconsolable and wanders around crying, "My only child, where are you?" When he goes to the Buddha, probably hoping for some words of comfort, the Buddha first tells him that his faculties are deranged, not exactly a kindly message. The father asks, how could my faculties not be deranged, considering the circumstances? And here's where the Buddha delivers his message. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are born from those who are dear, arise from those who are dear. The father remains unconvinced, saying that happiness and joy are born from those who are dear, and he leaves the Buddha displeased. Now he encounters some gamblers nearby, and when he tells them of this interchange, they agree that the Buddha has got it all wrong, that our loved ones bring us happiness, not pain. I agree with the gamblers, says the man. One thing we can be sure of in the suttas, if you agree with gamblers in opposition to the Buddha, then you are definitely on the wrong track. The story of this encounter gets back to the palace where our friends King Pasenadi and Queen Malika, I wrote about them in an earlier chapter, where our friends King Pasenadi and Queen Malika, who told each other they loved themselves, hear of it. Malika, being the Buddha's devotee, says that it must be true if the Buddha says so. Pasenadi, perhaps a bit jealous, seems to mock her devotion, saying that no matter what the Buddha says, she agrees, just like an apple polishing student. The queen wants to make sure she has it right and sends a Brahmin to confirm what the Buddha said. When he does so, Malika goes to Pasenadi and asks how he would feel if the princess got ill or died. He admits that he would suffer terribly. She then lists other people he loves and gets the same response. Finally, she asks how he'd feel if something happened to some of the regions he ruled. For those of us who aren't rulers, this might be similar to our house burning down or our car being stolen. At this point, Pasenadi gets it, that suffering arises from his attachment to that which is dear. So it's one of the less, easy to swallow teachings. And it is shocking when this father comes to the Buddha in grief And the Buddha says, come to your senses, which we can understand in Buddhism is like a literal thing. He means be aware of your sense experience, be present with this experience, see that what's going on here is suffering. And it's a really tricky teaching. And I go on to talk about it more in this chapter, but I'll just, talk about it more spontaneously. That, if we take this, if we think, oh, I've got to be a good Buddhist, I can't have any attachment. We put ourselves in this untenable situation. We can't live our lives without having attachments or connections with other human beings. That's not healthy. And indeed, if we look at the Buddha's life, he doesn't go off after he gets enlightened. He doesn't go off and live as a hermit in a cave. He's deeply engaged and connected to people. And I refer to this story in this chapter too, to kind of try to get some balance, where that near the end of the Buddha's life, he's looking out at the Sangha, and his dearest friends that he kind of, has been on this path with for most of his adult life, at least since he left, his life as a royal. His deepest friends, Mahamoggallanda, and I think Sariputta, and some others have passed away. They're dead. And he's looking out at the Sangha, and he says in this very touching sutta, he says, the Sangha seems empty to me. And he quickly kind of, and who knows who wrote this, because this is like, that seems real to me. And then very quickly the sutta says, yeah, but I'm not suffering, or what, I don't know how it's exactly phrased, but you get that, maybe he said that, or maybe the people who edited the suttas over the years didn't want the Buddha to look too human. But the point is that the Buddha's not, he's not other than human. He was human, and he had human feelings. And so I don't think that he's saying that we shouldn't have connections with people, that we shouldn't love people, that there's something wrong with it. He doesn't say, after he says sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are born from those who are dear, he does not go on to say, so don't have anyone don't be dear, don't have those attachments. He doesn't go there. So what's the point of this teaching? Well, for me, the point of this teaching is that when we understand the truth, the pain that we experience is not dukkha. It's the normal pain of loss, of grief, which is normal and healthy. Dukkha is something else. Dukkha is this, to me, I think one of the elements of dukkha that, and I've never read this is just my own take on it, but I think one of the elements of dukkha is misunderstanding or confusion about reality. And that's where dukkha, which is this word we translate as suffering, but that dukkha always has this element of what we call in Buddhism ignorance. You don't get it. And so you're really that's when you're really in pain. What is going on? I don't get, this is horrible. I don't get it. But when we understand, oh, this is all part of natural law, that love and attachment mean that there will be grief, and that's okay, that that's life, then it's not dukkha, it's just life. It's like, the Buddha's constantly, the 5 daily recollections, which I persist in doing each day, tell us to reflect that we are bound to die. Now that doesn't sound like a way to be happy, but and death is not something most of us, want, but it's totally inevitable. So the question becomes, how does death not become dukkha? You know? And I think the way it's not dukkha is if it's something that we accept and that we understand, so that when it comes, there's pain, there's grief, but there isn't dukkha. There isn't this confusion and struggle with it. There isn't a battle with it. There isn't the sense, this isn't supposed to happen. This is wrong. This shouldn't be happening. In the same way that someone that we love, when they die, that we feel all the grief and we feel all that pain, but there isn't this sort of idea that like God made a mistake sort of thing that people, it's not, no, this is natural. And this teaching, I mean, this is a very, tough one, the way it's delivered, but it's in all of the teachings of Dharma. It's in the teaching of impermanence, that everything is constantly changing. I was watching that a global initiative concert. It was like a 24-hour concert for environmentalism over the weekend, and I think it came on after the Ryder Cup. So it just was. My TV was still on, And first there was a clip of Quincy Jones, and he was really old. And I was like, oh my God, Quincy Jones is so old. And it was just like, yeah, well, he's either going to be dead or old. So, take your pick. And then, Paul Simon came on, and it was like, man, this guy's really old. He's kind of like, doesn't seem like he remembers his songs. This is really sad. I was like, no, like he's just alive and old. It's like, that's, yeah. So, I just think that our tendency as humans, as untaught, or what's the term, the worldlings, untaught worldlings, or untaught lay people, as the Buddha talks about, our tendency is to sort of think that life is supposed to be this certain way, which is like la-di-da. And then when something bad happens, oh my goodness, that's a mistake. That's not supposed to happen. We've got to fix that. How do we take care of that? So, and it's, we're like, just completely deluded. No, life isn't supposed to be la-di-da and everything's great all the time. That's just, there's pleasant, there's unpleasant, and there's neutral. And that's the stuff that's constantly happening. And because nothing is permanent, anytime things are pleasant for a while, they're bound to be unpleasant as well. It can't be any other way. I can, in another way, I think of like this understanding as just maturity, because that understanding, that idea that life is supposed to be like so nice and nothing's supposed to go wrong, is very much a childish understanding. It's a childish view of life. And it's the way the world is presented to children: Santa Claus and tooth fairies and, and princesses and, and cowboys, I'm going to be a fireman when I grow up, and just kind of like, and, which is lovely. And children are, it's beautiful that children have that magical experience of life, because life is magical, but, in other ways. And, and I will say, since this is a collection, a group of people in recovery, that childish understanding is much of what informs addiction, right? Addiction is this almost, I've come to see it to some extent as an attempt to sustain the magic of childhood through adult means. So if the magic of childhood is like, everything's fun all the time, I should be happy all the time, I should feel good, and there's sort of this sparkly magic to it, like getting high and drinking provides a magical, sparkly effect temporarily, that we can kind of like, oh yeah, life is great, let's party, it's just great, let's have fun. And it's like, and then like I mean, that's just something normal that adults do, but addicts go, yeah, and let's do that all the time. And I should be able to have this all the time. Why shouldn't I be able to feel magic and sparkly, all the time? And, when we know where that leads. And so it's a perfect teaching. I think it's one of the reasons why people in recovery are drawn to the Dharma, because when they come out of that delusion, they've really seen the delusion. They've really seen how this idea that grasping after something can bring the answer and can bring happiness, that something can be maintained permanently, some pleasure can be maintained permanently. We see really clearly that that is not true, that simply doesn't work. And so we're ready, I think, to try a different way. And the Dharma presents, diagnoses that and describes that so well, and then says, here's this other way. Try practicing mindfulness, try practicing compassion and loving kindness, try looking at the world, taking off the rose-colored glasses and looking at the world as it truly is. And that's really inspiring. Then it's like, oh wow, okay, this is how life is, and it's okay. I can be okay with that. I don't have to run from that. I don't have to fix it. The world doesn't have to be magic. Yeah. I mean, even the way I was describing the body this morning and the mind in the meditation, it's like, that's magic. That's freaking magic. Yeah, our bodies and our minds are unbelievable, and being present for that. That's, if you want magic, it's right there. And the beauty of existence is what, that's the bright side. That's the beautiful side of mindfulness that we perhaps don't talk about enough. That, that seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, and thinking, when done with mindfulness, are rich, rich experiences. I mean, I stepped outside this morning and there's this smell, and it's like, oh, it's autumn. And even in Northern California, we have a form of autumn. It's not what people on the East Coast would call fall, and it was like, oh, and it's like magic to me. It's like, oh, that's just so transporting, so there are some thoughts for a Tuesday morning in September of 2021. Well, thank you for listening, and open it up for any thoughts or comments, my dear ones. Right. Exactly, Vicky. Thank you. Vicky, we're going to get you teaching pretty soon, because I'm not sure what your excuse is for not being a meditation teacher, but you've pretty much used up your excuses as far as I'm concerned. If you had any to start with. Pretty sure they were false humility. Well, not that you're being false, but like,
oh, you're right.
Misguided humility.
Hey, Kevin. Hi, it's Anne.
Yes, Anne.
Hi. Wow. Can I just say wow? That was pretty awesome. Yeah. So much there. Wow. But I'm coming back to, in the meditation, it was such a beautiful, like real time description of like working with the hindrance of sleepiness. And
Mm.
that's what I've been focused on for the last few months, several. And it's been a very interesting experience. But I noticed that you at some point you made a choice in that where you were just going to allow and watch and be present with basically that mind state and not go to any sort of, you know, counterbalancing effort or anything like that, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious about, you know, I don't know. I mean, and then I ask the question, and I'm like, so what? You know, it's like that's the
Well,
point. Be with it, right?
no,
But I mean,
no,
I'm just,
that's not just the point. Really, my experience is that the antidotes are mostly ineffective when you get to a point of when you're just exhausted. That, I did open my eyes a few times, and I did straighten my posture and take a couple of deep breaths, but none of that really breaks through. The thing that I think breaks through is just keep sitting,
yeah,
you know.
right. Just
Yeah.
keep showing up no
Yeah.
matter what fire ring you're going, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's what I resonated with. Just
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
Because, yeah. Mhm. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people with hands up, and I do have a tea time, so officially this ends at 11, but we'll run a little. I'm gonna, even though Ken showed up, put his hand up later, I'm gonna ask Ken to speak because the last time Ken had his hand up, I didn't let him speak because I ran out of time. So Ken, take it away, brother.
Time's just a construct anyway. I've been reading Vonnegut.
It's not a construct when it's a tea time, man. That's the reality. You don't show up there, you don't get to play. So,
This
but
is
go on. What did you want to say
this is
this
the
morning?
second time this happened, because I did the same thing last week. You referenced the sutra, and I pulled it up on Access to Insight, and then read through it, and then I read through it all week last week. I don't think the Buddha is telling this man that he's lost his mind because he's grieving.
Mm-hmm.
I think the essence of dukkha is that we reject. Dukkha is rejecting your experience. I'm going to feel something difficult. I am going to grieve. I'm going to be sad. And that's just sort of part of the process.
Right.
But when I say, no, I don't want it, when my stepson was 2 and something would happen and he didn't like it, he'd go, don't want it. So I kind of refer to that as channeling my inner 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm channeling my inner 2-year-old to my experience, that becomes an acute form of suffering.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think so. I think that really is the essence of the argument.
Yeah, definitely.
To just stop meeting everything with some form of attachment or aversion, which is where all of the work is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thanks.
Now I'm going to have to spend a week reading this sutra like I did last week.
Yeah, and I go by Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations, so I'm sure that Thanissaro has a different way. He does very different translations, and most of his translations are the ones that are on Access. So it's always interesting to compare. Yeah. Thanks. Catherine T.
Hi there, Kevin. It's my first time sharing. Very lovely meditation, and just the whole thing. I wanted to I appreciate you touched on what I've been doing a lot of research. My husband believes in determinism, and so there's been a lot of back and forth of like what the illusion of free will and such. So I've been doing a lot of like meditating on that, and I really felt that in the meditation you kind of touched on that, where the body, I can't find your square, sorry, I'm like looking at, I don't know where you are, but you're somewhere out there on the Zoom screen. Sorry.
You're looking for me?
Oh, there you are. Thank you.
Oh, I need to speak, right?
Yeah, so it's like, it was cool where you were talking about, like, you know, the body doesn't, it breathes on its own. Like, there are things that we, and then step 3, or I do, where we were supposed to turn this would-be will over, this free will, this self-will, over to the power greater than ourselves. And so it's just really great to have a new way of kind of looking at it, and it just opened up my eyes to exploring that a little bit more, from just a different perspective. And so I don't know if you intended for that to be a part of it, but it was cool. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, the Buddha addresses determinism quite often in the suttas, and because he's, you know, his teaching is that everything is based on karma, on cause and effect, and so he's very dismissive of determinism, because it, you know, it's so you know, it takes away our agency, and you know, he just said, I mean, you know, there's a lot of like magical stuff in the suttas. So, because the Buddha says that on the night of his enlightenment, he was able to go back and see how all beings created their own karma over many lifetimes. And you know, I don't believe in reincarnation, and I don't not believe in reincarnation. I just don't know, you know, but I do think that, you know, the idea that everything is already predetermined is a very, it's not, for me, it's not a helpful idea. It's, you know, even if it were possible, but yeah, and yet there's also, you know, a lot of argument to be made against the idea of free will, given how conditioned things are. So it's a very tricky line. Ultimately, I think not where to spend a lot of time, you know, rather just be present for what's happening, and yeah, rather than try to figure out how it all works. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Flo, hello.
Hi, Kevin.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about what you were reading. I had read this before, but underlined different parts of it. But it's just it's come through this week. You know, my husband and I are coming up on our 19th wedding anniversary, and last week he had a surgery for like a Mohs surgery, skin cancer. And it's caused a lot of like frustration on my part. And I realized that it was coming out through me not being able to be with what was happening, trying to control, which being uncomfortable and not accepting things as they were. But this teaching just helped me realize that I think it's more of just how I react to it. And like you were saying, like when we understand that pain and grief are like part of life, like that dukkha is more about the confusion. And I think that's where I was just getting caught up in the dukkha part, rather than just being like, okay, this is an unpleasant situation. You know, we do what we can, and then we keep moving forward. But I did like that definition of dukkha being misunderstanding or confusion about reality. So that helped me a little bit with personal things. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, Flo. Flo was on the Southern Dharma retreat a few weeks ago. So it's nice to see people who I actually was with in a space, in IRL, as they say, as the young people say. So, well, this was nice morning, actually. Trying to think if there's anything coming up that I should tell you about it. I'm going to do a day long for Sacramento insight on I think it's October 16th. Can't find my calendar. Doesn't seem to be up on my, let me look at my calendar on my phone. So I'm doing a day-long, it's just a recovery day, it's on, the 16th, and it's like 9 to 4 Pacific time. And, I don't have any big plan about what the day it'll be. It'll be like sit and talk about recovery and Dharma. Other than that, we just have the Redwood Glen Buddhism 12-step retreat coming up on the 24th. And I suspect that Angela probably in her efficient way has put information about that in. Yes, it's in the chat. If you guys have not been able to sign up, we do. As we've mentioned before, we have some scholarship money. Everybody will have to show vaccination status, and we'll have on-site rapid testing for everyone who arrives. So I hope that people can come. They were supposed to have a certain number of people, but the center has been understanding about the fact that we might not reach the 30 people that we're supposed to have, but I'm guessing that a bunch of people will start to sign up as the time comes. A lot of retreats are getting canceled. Vicki just told me her IMS retreat got canceled, and I think having a small retreat like this makes it more manageable than trying to have 100 people at IMS or Spirit Rock. That's really tough. So I feel pretty safe about what we're going to do. And, I'm probably going to get a booster shot actually in the next couple of weeks. Anyway, I'm eligible for that. And someone just sent me a direct message asking about any ideas about spring retreat previously at Vajrapani. I will say that Vajrapani just hired a new executive director. So Vajrapani is the retreat center in the mountains of Santa Cruz Mountains, where I've held retreats for many years. And the last year and this year, the first time since 2004, I haven't taught there. And I'm hopeful that the fact that they have a new executive director means that they're going to start to get back online, because I usually go there for self-retreat, and they haven't had self-retreats open. So hopefully that'll be happening. So is there a link for the day long? It's on my website. If you go to the calendar on my website, yeah, that's the best thing I can tell you right now. Oh, here it is. I just had it up and then I lost it. Sorry. Let's see. I can put it up there. Upcoming events. Okay. The internet works really well. Here it is. Okay. This should give you, and I have to get my web person to straighten out the way these things look, because for some reason there's a lot of darkness on my website these days. So here's the link to the Sacramento day long. So there you go. All right, dears. Friday night, I shall be back at 7 p.m. Pacific, and we'll continue. Be well.